Next on Currents News, anti-Semitism taking off in Brooklyn. Patrol stepping up their presence, but does it even help?
This is not going to be solved by a few extra police cars.
A rabbi with what New York City really needs. And an inside look at the families at the heart of the crisis in the Holy Land. Why they couldn't escape Gaza even if they wanted to. Then we're back at square one. Biden ordering U.S. intelligence to intensify investigations into the COVID-19 origins. Plus, free college, how a shot in their arm could get your child's head in the books. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Michelle Powers. The NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating yet another anti-Semitic attack, this time in Brooklyn. They say a Jewish man was punched as he tried to enter a Sheepshead Bay synagogue. It's just the latest in a string of violence following the 11-day conflict in the Holy Land.
I'll knock you out.
Disturbing cell phone video shows a man hurling anti-Semitic insults at a group of Jewish men. Police say this suspect punched a 67-year-old man in the face when he tried to enter a synagogue in Sheepshead Bay. The suspect was arrested and charged with assault, but the Hate Crimes Task Force is still investigating. The arrest is the most recent in a string of assaults against Jewish people. A victim in Times Square spoke out about his assault on Tuesday.
That was probably the most pain I've been in quite a long time.
Joseph Borgen recalling this terrifying assault in Times Square last week. The 29-year-old who was wearing a yarmulke was on his way to a pro-Israel rally.
Before I could even react, I was surrounded by a whole crowd of individuals who, as you mentioned, proceeded to kick me, punch me, hit me with flagpoles, crutches.
He says the gang of attackers was yelling anti-Semitic slurs.
There is increased anti-Semitism, and we do need to be attentive to it.
Rabbi Brad Hirschfield with the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership says these events are stemming from violence after the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Here in New York City, hate crimes reported to the NYPD that they stand at 202 so far this year, which is a 77% increase compared to the same point in 2020. Many of them are crimes against Jews. Rabbi Hirschfield says anti-Israel and anti-Semitism are not the same, but that line has been crossed.
We're going to really have to figure out what it means on all sides to support the causes we believe in, but not fuel them with historic hatreds and biases. It's simply because you believe your cause is good. It doesn't mean everything you do in the name of that cause is good.
He says he's happy with the city's response, adding more police patrols in Jewish neighborhoods, but says the problem won't be solved until people stop using politics to justify their hatred. Over now to the epicenter of the conflict, the Holy Land. Secretary of State Antony Blinken left Israel and is now on the second leg of his journey, Egypt. He left Tel Aviv after meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister and Palestinian Authority President. He promised more than $360 million to help rebuild Gaza, money he says will not go to Hamas. Blinken called Egypt an effective partner in dealing with the conflict in the Holy Land, and he says the U.S. will work with the country to bolster the ceasefire.
We both believe strongly that Palestinians and Israelis deserve equally to live in safety and security, to enjoy equal measures of freedom, opportunity, and dignity.
Blinken says Egypt, which pushed Hamas to agree to the ceasefire, is vital to keeping the peace in the Middle East. Though the United States has promised to help rebuild homes, businesses, and infrastructure in Gaza, the future remains bleak for those who live there. Currents News' Jessica Easthope explains they have little hope to escape because of politics and blockades.
Gaza, this narrow strip of land on the Mediterranean, home to 2 million people, has been under an Israeli-Egyptian blockade since Hamas took over in 2007. Among other things, the blockade was intended to isolate Hamas and prevent the militants from smuggling in arms. But since then, Hamas and other groups have been able to manufacture and launch tens of thousands of rockets into Israel. And Hamas, 14 years later, is still firmly in control. In Khan Yunis, residents queue for food donated by Egypt, Qatar, and Malaysia. About half the population is dependent on food aid. Unemployment is almost 50%. And for many, leaving Gaza or traveling anywhere has been impossible.
No travel.
Everyone has the same answer. No. Never. Like the others, Raida says she has never stepped foot outside Gaza, never been on a plane or a train. Gaza is hemmed in by Israel to the north and east, Egypt to the south. Israel and Egypt allow a limited amount of goods, strictly controlled, into Gaza, but exporting is difficult. For the people here, whether they support Hamas or not, and many don't, they are all serving the same sentence, says analyst Khaimer Abu Saada.
Gaza has become the biggest open-air prison on the face of earth.
If the blockade is not lifted, this may be the closest to flying some of these children will ever be. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem is launching a special collection for the suffering people of Gaza and the small Christian population living there. The collection will be held in all Latin Rite parishes and churches this Sunday. Turning now to a developing story, at least 8 people are dead following a shooting at a San Jose rail yard. The gunman is also dead. That's what we know right now. Police say the shooter was part of Santa Clara Valley's Transit Authority and took his own life. His house was also on fire earlier this morning. A bomb squad was on the scene searching for explosive devices as the investigation grows.
This is still a fluid and active, ongoing investigation. We have all the resources out here from city, county, and federal agencies out here, including the FBI and the DA and Homeland Security out here to assist with this investigation.
At this point, police have not yet released a motive for the shooting. The Bishop of the Diocese of San Jose is praying for the victims, releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "May shock and grief give way to healing and grace as we work together to protect the innocent and prevent such senseless acts in the future so that peace may prevail in our hearts and communities." The United States is making strides on the vaccination front, but it seems we are back to square one on perhaps COVID's biggest question. How and where did it begin? President Biden today called on U.S. intelligence agencies to redouble their efforts to determine the origin of the coronavirus. Isabel Rosales has the story and the deadline.
Growing scrutiny about the origins of the coronavirus. While many scientists believe the virus emerged naturally at a Wuhan wet market, its source has not been definitively traced.
The way to know is to go there, sequence all these early viruses, and see how things went from bats to humans, and perhaps with an intermediate host.
The lab leak theory, once considered a conspiracy, is now gaining traction.
I believe what most likely happened is there was an accidental leak followed by a criminal cover-up.
A U.S. intelligence report found several researchers at China's Wuhan Institute of Virology got sick with COVID-like symptoms and had to be hospitalized before China's first reported case. The lab and China's government strongly deny the report.
If it did come out of a lab, that would be a first for the world, is that right?
I believe so.
A new CNN reporting shows President Joe Biden's team shut down a Trump-era State Department investigation to prove the virus originated in a Chinese lab over concerns about the quality of the work. The probe, headed by then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Have you seen anything that gives you high confidence that it originated in that Wuhan lab?
Martha, there's enormous evidence that that's where this began.
The consensus among health experts and lawmakers, there needs to be an investigation.
We're 18 months into this pandemic and no one can show where this virus came from.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, Currents News.
At the same time, the CDC has announced it will stop investigating cases where fully vaccinated people contract COVID-19. These cases are also known as breakthrough infections, and health officials say just over 10,000 cases were reported as of April 30th. The agency is still investigating instances that have resulted in hospitalizations or death. Some critics say the agency will miss important opportunities about the real-world effectiveness of the different vaccines. They may also miss important trends like how long the vaccine protection lasts and who is more susceptible to those breakthrough infections. A Brooklyn library is honoring coronavirus victims in a very special way, by hand and by an ancient art, origami. There are 1,000 paper cranes currently inside a Greenpoint branch. Each has a message of love and hope written inside. Current News' Emily Druby visited the library and has a look at the touching display.
Step by step, this small piece of paper transforms into a symbol of hope, a crane. It's a task Rebecca Cowley has done many times.
In Japanese culture, there's this tradition of if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you get a wish. And it's often done to symbolize hope and love and peace.
They now have 1,000 cranes proudly displayed in their windows, and they're wishing for healing. An idea hatched by her and the staff at Greenpoint Library, which was recently opened. A COVID-19 remembrance project honoring those who were taken too soon.
And we were just brainstorming ideas to memorialize the past year of collective grief that the culture and the nation has been experiencing.
Over 58,000 American lives lost, 33,000 in New York City alone. And the only 2.7 miles of Greenpoint, Brooklyn, 52 were taken by the disease. Grief, a pain that's known intimately here.
We've had some coworkers who work at this branch who've lost family members.
But now these cranes are flying in change. As Fritzi Bodenheimer of the overarching Brooklyn Public Library explains, they provide hope and a place to reflect.
Even today, as I was approaching, I saw people stopping, taking pictures, taking a minute to take it in. It's commemorative, but also it's so bright and beautiful, it gives you hope.
The idea took flight. Members of the community began making the cranes too.
Sometimes you'll get a story from someone giving you the crane. You know, someone close to me has passed.
It's where about a third of them came from.
Folding in.
The rest were made by the employees here like Rebecca, a labor of love for their new community. A grandmother, a friend, a son, a wife. Collective grief brought together to create something powerful. In Greenpoint, Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News.
And from handcrafted installations to computer-generated ones, the story of students at a Catholic university recreating the grounds they love online. The pandemic changed their lives, but not their campus. And another warning for unvaccinated Americans. It may be Memorial Day, but the CDC says we are still fighting a war. Plus, free college tuition in exchange for a shot in your child's arm. You heard me right. But will you do it? That's next. If you ask students, the best part about college is campus life. But for so many, it's been more than a year since they stepped foot on it. One Catholic university decided they couldn't wait to get back on their grounds, so they decided to build it virtually. And you know the saying, if you build it, they will come. Current News' Jessica Easthope has the story of how a new community began away from Lincoln Center.
For the last year, streaming classes, virtual meetings, and online campus events have been the norm.
I've never seen this before.
No. But one group of students at Fordham University is taking it a step further.
In the basement.
Zoe DEMACOPOULOS is a senior at Fordham. She's been playing the video game Minecraft for 10 years.
I've played on a total of 100 different servers. And I've been a moderator on 3 of them.
Well, you know what else I could do?
So when she heard the school was starting a project called RAMCRAFT, she teleported right in.
It's a virtual form of Legos, and you basically build piece by piece whatever it is you wish to construct. In our case, it's the buildings around here.
The plaza.
Chris VICARI, an educational technologist at Fordham, started the program. With blocks, or voxels as they're called in the game, he and a group of student volunteers are building the school. The virtual realm is almost identical to the real thing.
We're looking at Google Earth, we're looking at Google Maps, we're working with Fordham facilities to get blueprints of the structures. The math calculation calculations going on behind the scenes about how scale-wise do we make these structures. Like 1,700 feet.
But Chris says recreating the buildings isn't all fun and games. It takes a ton of time.
Some buildings take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we dedicate more time to detail.
Many of the students participating have never even set foot on campus. The program has allowed them to build friendships as they build the school. Zoe says the brightness of her computer screen brought some light to the darkest days of the pandemic.
It's just really nice to be able to leave a mark.
For Zoe, the reality of RAMCRAFT is something Fordham prides itself on, and there's nothing virtual about it.
I can really relate it to one of Fordham's Catholic pillars of this university, which is Cura Personalis, care for the entire person. This program is really about making connections and building community.
Coloring is different.
What the students are really doing is designing their futures.
They can be a part of something that they can put on their portfolio, their resume. It's more than just playing games, it's an opportunity.
The entire Fordham realm will take a few years to build and might even be the future of campus tours. In Manhattan, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
So tech savvy. In the meantime, New York City is offering a ton of incentives for people to get their shot. And the latest one is a big one: free college tuition. Governor Andrew Cuomo made the announcement at his daily press conference today.
We will raffle off on a weekly basis full tuition, room, and board scholarships to any public college or university for 4 years.
Starting from this Thursday until July 7th, anyone between 12 and 17 who gets their first shot will be entered into the raffle. Now, if your child has already gotten their shot, there's still time to sign up. Just head over to ny.gov and enter their name. Some other fun incentives for those just getting the shot: if you get vaccinated anytime between now and the 31st, you'll get a free 2-day family pass to any of the state's 16 parks. And there are new prizes added weekly. This week, you'll get a free gym membership. You can also get a free scratch-off ticket. Several New York attractions are giving away free passes and tickets if you get your shot there, like the Bronx Zoo, Coney Island Aquarium, and Brooklyn Botanical Garden. And if you get a shot at a vac site in the subway, you can get a free 7-day Metro card. And from the subways to the skies, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is reporting that air travel is going up. Just this past Sunday, the TSA logged the highest passenger volume since the pandemic began.
That day, this past Sunday, TSA screened 7 times more passengers than it did on the same day in 2020. It's really fantastic to see people traveling again to visit friends and family across the country.
At the same time, a recent poll released Tuesday shows 58% of Americans believe air travel poses large or moderate risk. And that's sending many Americans to the roads instead. Those planning to travel for the upcoming Memorial Day holiday should expect to pay a little extra at the gas pumps. The national average price of gas is just over $3 a gallon. The U.S. hasn't seen prices this high since 2014. The forced shutdown of the Colonial Pipeline after a cyber attack is still partly the blame, along with an increase in demand. And for those heading out of town to kick off the unofficial start of summer, Britt Conway has more on what you need to know before you go.
Whether by air, by sea, or by land, Americans are taking back travel, thanks to more vaccinations and fewer restrictions. People in the industry say travel is in for a big rebound.
This Memorial Day weekend, you're going to start to see something that is unlike anything we've ever seen.
Which makes sense considering what this past year has been like.
When things are taken away from you, you want it more. What was taken away from us? Traveling and connecting with other people.
But connecting might cost you. AAA says Memorial Day travelers will pay the highest gas prices for the holiday since 2014. And the nation's major airlines say airfare costs are near or even above pre-pandemic levels. You still need your mask, though.
This is a federal mandate, and it is based on a CDC order.
The FAA says it's gotten 1,900 reports of passengers violating the mask requirement. But it's not just pushback against masks. The FAA says incidents with unruly passengers have become a big concern. A Southwest Airlines flight attendant was assaulted this past weekend. The Union for the Airline's flight attendants is calling for more safety regulations, and the FAA says they're fining people. We're talking thousands of dollars here. So pack your patience and prepare.
Talk to your airlines, talk to your airports, talk to your destinations, talk to your hotels.
I'm Britt Conway reporting.
Now to another sign of trouble for the Summer Olympics. One of the official partners of the Games is joining calls for a cancellation. This time it's one of Japan's largest newspapers. Selena Wang has more from Tokyo.
I'm standing outside of the Asahi Shimbun headquarters in Tokyo. It's one of the most influential newspapers in Japan, and its editorial was scathing. In its piece, it asked the question of what is the point of the Olympic Games if it's being held against the will of the public and threatening people's lives. It wrote, quote, "We don't think it makes sense to hold the Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo this summer. The distrust and opposition toward the ruling government, the Tokyo government, and Olympic officials are widespread as they haven't tried to address people's doubts and concerns." This comes after poll in Japan showing that the majority of the population here does not want the Games held this summer. And now U.S. public health experts are calling for an urgent risk assessment of the issues associated with the Olympic Games, saying that the Olympic plans are moving forward without being informed by science, saying that the risk is not just from getting COVID here in Japan, but also spreading other variants around the world when those athletes return to their home countries. Here in Japan, only 2% of the population has been fully vaccinated. Tokyo and large parts of the country are under a state of emergency. And in Osaka, doctors are warning of a system collapse with bed space and ventilators running out. Despite all these mounting concerns, however, the IOC, the real decision maker here, continues to say that they are confident these games can be held safely and securely. Selena Wang, Tokyo.
Still to come on Currents News, the search is on for rosary beads worth more than $1 million. We'll tell you who used to own them and how Pope Francis honored a Holocaust survivor who visited him at the Vatican. It's a sort of homecoming for a soon-to-be saint. Relics of the first millennial to be declared blessed, CARLO ACUTIS, have arrived at 2 parishes in London. While ACUTIS is Italian, he was born in London and baptized there. The pastor at his church says they are delighted to have him back. Meanwhile, also in England, investigators are trying to get back a set of rosary beads that once belonged to Mary, Queen of Scots. We're told burglars broke into a castle that was the ancestral home of the Duke of Norfolk, forced open a display cabinet, and took off with several gold and silver items worth about $1.4 million. The golden rosary beads are said to have been carried by Mary, the Catholic relative of Queen Elizabeth I, when Mary was sent to her execution in 1587. And finally tonight, a touching moment at the Vatican. During his general audience, Pope Francis stopped to speak with a Holocaust survivor. The woman took off the striped scarf she was wearing to symbolize the uniform she wore as a prisoner at Auschwitz. She also showed the pontiff the tattoo of her prison number, which he kissed as a sign of respect. Before saying goodbye, she gave the pontiff that scarf. And that is Currents News. I'm Michelle Powers. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.